is Danny Rand? Where did he come from? And how did he learn to punch so good? Today, on Issue at Hand, I talk Iron Fist. This is Issue at Hand, Polygon's series about the strange world of comic books, and I'm your host, Susana Polo. And the Netflix Iron Fist series comes out tonight, so let's get you up to speed. Danny Rand has a pretty normal life for a superhero. He's the orphan child of billionaires who developed his core skills in a vaguely Asian or Middle Eastern locale, and then returned to the West to retake control of his family's wealth and fight crime. Danny's parents were killed in an ill-fated expedition to locate the mythical city of Kunlun, the Brigadoon of vaguely Tibetan martial arts monasteries. In the show, his parents died in a plane crash, but in the comics, their deaths were cold-blooded murder at the hands of Harold Meacham, a business partner who stood to take control of Rand assets if the family was to be lost in the wilderness. But, as luck would have it, the disaster was not far from Kunlun, and Danny was taken in and apprenticed to train. By the age of 16, he was his teacher's most accomplished student. At 19, Danny defeated the immortal dragon Xiao Lao, gaining his distinctive chest tattoo and the ability to focus his chi into his fists and make them like iron. Like iron fists. Danny Rand was created by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane in 1974, a direct response to the popularity of kung fu movies at the time. This wasn't an unusual move for Marvel back then. Luke Cage had been created a few years earlier during the height of the blaxploitation trend in film. And when readers started to cool on both genres, Marvel threw Danny into Luke's book and changed the title to Power Man and Iron Fist. The unconventional pairing of a white kung fu champion and a black mercenary for the urban community worked, and the two remained a team for 75 issues. Luke isn't the only partner of Iron Fist who's been featured on Netflix. In the comics, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight are martial artists, and were private detective partners in their own firm, Nightwing Restorations. Colleen is being played by Jessica Henwick in Iron Fist, and Misty already made her debut in Luke Cage as a Harlem police detective, played by Simone Missick. In the comics, Danny and Misty wind up dating, getting married, and having a daughter, who they name after Luke, and Luke and Jessica Jones wind up naming their daughter after Danny, because Luke Cage and Danny Rand are literally the best bros. But an episode about Netflix's Iron Fist adaptation wouldn't be complete if we just talked about the text. There are plenty of metatextual issues to unpack about the process of bringing a 40-year-old pulp relic to gritty modern screens. And those problems begin with how Danny Rand's story is a stock example of a very common cliché in adventure fiction, one that has established racist overtones. Danny is one of a long succession of white characters who, when stranded in a completely foreign native culture, not only overcome their outsider status and thrive, but become that society's greatest warrior, hero, or leader. TVTropes.com calls this Mighty Whitey, and examples include Marvel's Iron Fist and Doctor Strange, classic pulp characters like the Phantom, and, if we want to include allegories for human natives, James Cameron's Avatar, John Carter of Mars, and Tarzan. This cliché is a problem because it allows us to strip mine other cultures for what we narrowly think is cool about them, creating a stereotype. And then we use that stereotype as a building block for our own cultural mythology by placing a triumphant white person at the center of it. And our media can do all of this while it continues to suppress the voices of people who are actually of that culture and present them as stereotypical villains and subordinates to the white hero in the text. It's great for a person to want to immerse themselves in another culture as a way of expanding their experiences, but decades and decades of white characters joining another culture, becoming the best at that other culture, and then becoming triumphant heroes that's just embarrassing. This is one of the reasons that the casting of Doctor Strange and Iron Fist have been so fraught with controversy, even though the characters are white in the comics and white on the screen. As Marvel has started to dip deeper into its well of characters for adaptation, it's started to pull up some stories that a lot of people have pointed out cannot just be repeated at face value anymore. Race-bending the lead from a white character to an Asian or Asian American one is one of the simplest ways to keep all the important aspects of Danny Rand's character intact, but fundamentally change the racial politics of his story for the better. Alex Abad-Santos has done a lot of writing on the Iron Fist casting controversy for Vox.com, and here's what he's had to say.
A half-Asian American boy, or a black teenager, or even a Latina girl from pretty much any American city would be just as freaked out and feel just as isolated if they were dropped into a magical Asian city. I don't buy that Danny Rand's whiteness is as integral to his character as Storm or Luke Cage's black skin, or Magneto surviving the Holocaust. But I can understand why white people, and white dudes especially, can relate to a story of a white man feeling like an outsider. Still, I don't believe that white people, and white dudes especially, need Rand to be a white man to be able to relate to his story of being an outsider.
Oh, hey, Alex.
Hey, what's up?
So before Finn Jones was officially cast, there were a couple different sort of like discussions and proposals for how to make Iron Fist sort of grapple with the tropes that it's working with. And one of them was to make Danny an Asian character, or to make him an Asian American character by casting an Asian actor or an Asian American actor in the role.
So I think the thing with Danny Rand becoming, or the desire to make Danny Rand Asian, was that you have these Asian stereotypes, and you have an Asian story with just a white guy at the center of it. And I think when you see what fans wanted was, if you made the character Asian, you could have told a new story, and you could have gotten rid of that white savior trope, which I think kind of plagues a lot of the stuff that was written at the time. Like, we know better than when Iron Fist was originally written, and we can make better stuff now. Yeah. And I think that was basically the impetus of why people wanted Danny Rand to be Asian.
And this discussion confuses a lot of folks who are familiar with this argument from the other end, where we want a character's canonical race to remain the same in adaptation, like in movies like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, I think at the core of that is representation. And what you have is you just have a lack of people of color who can see themselves on screen. It's changing and getting better, but I think it's only changing and getting better because you have those characters there. And when you take away like a character from Ghost in the Shell and you make them white, it just kind of, compared to the plethora of white characters out there, it feels like you're taking away more. And I think that's what you get at, is you kind of get rid of the representation when you start taking away roles that are made for and written by and have stories where you have Asian American or people of color being the protagonists and the main characters.
Yeah. And race-bending Danny into an Asian character isn't a perfect solution for sort of it kind of solves the white savior trope in his story, but like makes him stereotypical in other ways, right?
I sometimes call this like the Tiger Lily effect. Mm-hmm. And if you remember Tiger Lily from Peter Pan, it's a completely stereotypical kind of minstrel character that's just like makes you go, ugh. It's just a very problematic, weirdly insensitive portrayal. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the times when you see like Peter Pan adaptations, you see the debate of whether a white woman should be cast or a woman of color should be cast. And I think and the problem arises when you have a woman of color be cast, like a Native American actually playing that stereotype. That doesn't fix the problem at all.
Because it's still a stereotype.
Yeah. And so one of the things that was also part of that call for Danny Rand to be Asian was this request for Marvel to be more, cognizant of stereotypes. And they wanted better writing, because if you just cast an Asian American character or Asian character in it, it could still be stereotypical, it could still be kind of bad. And you kind of need that extra layer of, hey, we need to think about like what we're writing and make sure the writing's really good and give you a good show at the same time.
Right.
So have you guys seen the show yet?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How is it? Did they actually put effort into the writing?
My best recommendation for you, if you're looking for an Iron Fist comic to sink your teeth into, is to check out the Eisner Award-winning The Immortal Iron Fist. It's the story of Danny Rand preparing for the biggest fight of his life and drawing on the history of previous incarnations of the Iron Fist to do it. And it's a story crafted by some of the all-time greats of modern superhero comics. Next time on Issue at Hand, I don't know, I'm gonna work it out.
Wait, what's Brigadoon?
I can't explain everything, Tara. He's the orphan child of billionaires who developed his core skills in a vaguely Asian or Middle Eastern locale. Is it locale or locale? Okay. He's the orphan child of billionaires who developed his core skills in a vaguely Asian or I was thinking about how to pronounce locale. Is it locale or locale?
Locale.
Locale, okay.